Hi, I'm Tina-Desiree Berg, and this week on Right Wing Insanity Report, I have a very special guest, Greg Palast, who is an investigative journalist that specializes in covering issues of voter suppression and election fraud. He has a new documentary out called Vigilante, produced by Martin Sheen, who I'm a huge fan of, by the way. He's a great union guy. And it really uncovers a lot of the right-wing extremists getting involved in voter suppression in the South, in Georgia, from True the Vote to Brian Kemp and others.
So you didn't call him, but you challenged his right to vote or have his ballot challenged.
No ballot. Mr. Turner, you have been challenged.
Is this an attempt to remove a lot of Democrats, black people from voting?
Get out of my house now.
Voter fraud.
Law enforcement is going to the houses and places of employment and making people afraid to go out and exercise their rights.
Open and clear, we have a visual. Repeat, we have a visual.
And today to come out and not be able to vote, it bothers me to my core.
My life was on the line, I could go to prison. If I just commit suicide, this will be over.
Stop voter fraud.
They raided a voter registration office and tried to send all of these college kids to jail.
Call our voter fraud hotline.
Tonight, Governor Kemp has signed that controversial election bill. He signed Senate Bill 202.
If you go back to the bill signing, you will see Governor Kemp sitting under a painting of a plantation.
Time to do something.
Some of that today and some other shenanigans that have been going on. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Glad to be with you again.
Right on. Yes, you've joined us before. We're always happy to have you. Vigilante is a great piece of work. I really enjoyed your documentary. It goes deep into some issues that I've been concerned about for a while. I wanted to start off talking about Brian Kemp because he seems to be front and center to a lot of the problems that we are seeing. So he's engaged in some nefarious acts. I want to talk first about the Quitman 10, which is the school board in Georgia. And he basically sent the GBI, which is the equivalent of the state's FBI, sort of a law enforcement wing, to arrest all 10 of these board members for, quote unquote, doing fake ballots, right? And none of it was true. They ended up being acquitted of these charges. But can you walk us through a little bit of this disturbing scenario?
Okay, so first, in case you've been living under a rock, Brian Kemp is the governor of Georgia, and he just beat Stacey Abrams in a rerun of their election. 2018, he clearly used his power as Secretary of State. That's the guy in charge of voting. That's a position that's really important in most states. People ignore it. Anyway, Brian Kemp was Secretary of State in charge of counting his own votes, running for office. And the minute he got in 2010, he's obviously a Republican. And when he was appointed in 2010, because he's a politically connected rich kid, the first thing he did is ordered the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, which at that time was kind of, frankly, like a brown shirt Gestapo army of the state, known for racist history. Their ranks were first created from the ranks of the Ku Klux Klan, and I'm not kidding you. The FBI actually.
Yeah, in fact, you go through some of this in your documentary. It's very interesting stuff.
So now you bring it up, and in fact, I just spoke to George Rhines, a great journalist in Quitman, just about 2 hours ago. And so what happened was he became Secretary of State in 2010. And he immediately started using threats of violence and force to go after black voters. And in particular, so in Quitman, what happened was 10 black people ran for the school board in this little town. They've never had a black member of the school board, even though it's a majority black township in Quitman, Georgia. So 10 black people ran for office and they won. Most of them were school teachers. They included 2 PhDs.
Right.
And Kemp had them arrested. They kicked in the doors. They arrested these people. They handcuffed them. They paraded them in orange suits. And he had them charged with the felony crime of vote tampering. Wow. He said that they were stuffing ballots, that someone saw them stuff ballots into a drop box. Okay, now this is the same thing that Trump has been talking about. So where did Trump get these ideas? When you ask, where did Trump get his crazy ideas about vote theft? It came from Brian Kemp, who was Secretary of State. Then he runs, so throughout his period, so he charged 10 black people, like these, and one had lupus, so the stress, according to her father, killed her.
Yeah, that's bad.
She died.
Oh, my God.
Her name was Latasha
awful.
Head, and she died from the stress because she had lupus. Another one of the a sociologist who was charged said she was really considering suicide as the only way out. And this is the governor of Georgia. And worse, this is the governor of Georgia that 60 Minutes and MSNBC and everyone else says is a great hero because he stood up to Trump. He did not.
He did not
Trump
stand up to
called him
Trump,
to fix the election. And all he said was, I don't have the... Trump said, call a special session of the legislature, have them reject the confirmations, the certifications from the counties, and change the vote. Find me 11,000 votes, infamously.
Right.
In fact, all Brian Kemp said was, correctly under the law, I don't have the power to change the vote. But here's the ugly thing. Are you ready for this one? They changed the law after the Democrats won in 2020. People were shocked. Right. The Democratic Party more than anyone. But the people on the ground knew that the Democrats were going to win because people just came out and voted like mad. So you elected 2 Democratic senators, Reverend Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff. So you had a black man and a Jewish man elected from Georgia. Not only were they elected from Georgia, but they're 2 of the most progressive senators in the Senate. Their politics are not much different than Bernie Sanders. And this is from Georgia. And of course, Biden won just by 11,000 votes officially. So they flipped out and they changed the law to say that. Is it the
disappearing boxes thing?
Well, what's happening? So several things happen. It's 98 pages of Jim Crow. One of the things that you should be very wary about for 2024 is that while Trump said, please decertify these count totals, and Lindsey Graham told the Secretary of State, decertify these counties' vote totals, mainly the counties of Atlanta, Fulton, and Gwinnett. Don't count their votes. Don't certify their votes, in which case Trump would have won the state.
Right.
Well, guess what? Under the new law, the governor can do that. He now has a new panel which allows him to reject the certifications by counties. If they don't do what he wants, he can fire and replace any members of the county boards which certify their elections. And by the way, it's not theoretical. Within weeks of signing the bill, SB 202.
This is SB 202, yeah.
SB
So I read about this from the
infamous
NAACP, yeah.
Yes, and the NAACP, in fact, calls it Jim Crow 2.2.
Right.
So SB 202 says that the governor, through a special new panel, can remove members of elections board, and he did. He's already removed 10 people. As far as I know, they're all black Democrats.
Of course.
Including Mrs. Vote. You'll see her in my film, Vigilante, Georgia's Vote Suppression Hitman is the name of my film. And you'll see Helen Butler say, I've been yanked from the voting board. And she is considered the state's top expert in voting. The NAACP is sued, but the law says Kemp has that power. So now when Trump calls him in 2024, if Trump gets a nomination, if we have a repeat and he loses Georgia, he can say, well, now you have the power, just change the vote. And believe me, Kemp will.
No, I believe you. Yeah.
I have been tracking Brian Kemp for 9 years. I've been tracking him since 2013 when he was involved in a program called Crosscheck, where he eliminated, where he's saying, "Oh, I'm getting rid of double voters." Then I got a hold of his secret list of double voters. You'll see this in the film in Vigilante. I got a hold of the list of the double voters. They say, "Oh, look, there's a guy named Jose Garcia in Atlanta."
There's 200 Jose Garcias.
And there's a Jose Garcia in Texas. Well, it must be the same Jose Garcia.
No, they're definitely not the same.
Well, you think, I know what you're thinking. Jose Garcia is a common name, but it's not a common name for a Republican. And so,
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So what happens is they knew who they were knocking out. 85% of the most common, according to census, 85 out of the 100 most common names in America are minority names, like Black, Johnson, Jackson, Jefferson, Wang, Kim, Levy, etc. Now, so they take out all these.
So they focus on that, what they perceive to be Democratic voters,
double voters, right? So that, so they got. Well, we killed that. We exposed it in a film I did called "The Best Democracy Money Can Buy," and we got it killed off. I worked with the ACLU. I worked with Black Voters Matter, and so in fact, this film has. So Vigilante. By the way, I want to tell you quickly that you can see Vigilante through the end of the Georgia runoff, which is, by the way, December 6th, Tuesday, December 6th. You could see it through actually till the midnight that night. And it's just go to vigilantemovie.com, vigilantemovie.com, and you can see it for gratis for the next 2 weeks. And by the way, after that, we're not going to release it till next year. So it's the only way to see it. There's no
It's very good. So I encourage everybody, if they have the opportunity to watch it, please do. It's very informative.
What was your favorite scene?
Really, the Garcia one where there's 211 guys purged off, because this is like a really common name. That's like in California, there's probably 5,000 guys with that same name.
I can tell you that right now. There are 832,000.
Okay, there you go.
In America.
Yeah. So what bothered me, Greg, too, is they could have gone that extra step to look at, middle initials, middle names, addresses, and known right away that.
No. But then you'd leave Jose Garcia's on the
list.
Voter list. And they vote 2-1, despite this supposed shift of minorities to the Republican Party, they still vote 2-1 Democratic. And you still have 90+% vote of black voters. And they removed 238 James Browns in Georgia, in just Georgia alone. So James Brown, and what color is James Brown? I don't know.
More than likely he's not white. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the thing
bad.
Yes, and then of
so
course,
voter cross-check is done.
But every time, that's why I go back every year for 9 years to Georgia. I live in Hollywood, and I used to I was living in London when I first started tracking Brian Kemp, because I was with BBC and The Guardian. I lived in London, but I'm finding out this guy's behind all this nationwide. You have to understand. Right. When you're looking at Georgia, okay, so for example, one of the things that we have in the film, the reason it's called Vigilante is that one of the 98 pages of Jim Crow trickery in SB 202 in Georgia is something which is known as a vigilante vote challenge. That is
right. No, let's talk about this. This is crazy. Yeah. This is absolutely crazy.
Anyone in Georgia can stop. Literally, can't make this up. Anyone in Georgia can say, don't let that person vote. Don't count their ballot. And I'm not kidding you. And the new Georgia law says that you can challenge an unlimited number of voters. Now, by unlimited, I want you to understand, unlimited means that one woman you'll see in the film, Pam Reardon's her name, a Republican Party operative.
Yeah.
She was running for vice chair of the party. She personally challenged 32,000 voters. And when we called 800 of them, and 800 voters said, "What, I'm being challenged?" And they were being challenged.
They didn't even know. Yeah, it's insane.
Don't live where they live, So when I confronted her, that is, I showed her pictures of the people that she challenged and said, "Did you call them? You speak to them? You go to their houses? Anything?" But she said they don't count their votes. And she says, "Well, I can't call 32,000 people." And I said, "But you challenged their vote." Anyway, she flipped out,
she kicked you out of the house. Yeah.
She kicked her out of her house.
I remember the scene.
I remember the scene. She kicked me out of the house, but the reason I left, you have to understand, there's ammo and guns literally all
everywhere.
Over and there's a automatic weapon. I said a shotgun, but it's as it
and they also
out,
have stand your ground laws, I believe. So there's that.
Yes, and so one of the problems is that someone identified it who watched the movie and said, that's a Russian modified assault rifle that she had propped up against her front door. So I wasn't going to argue with her. You get to see this in the film, and
it's great.
But
it's
I'm laughing about it, but it's actually quite tragic because the other thing is, so she challenged 32,000 people. We had a guy in Muskogee challenge 4,000. Now this guy in Muskogee who challenged 4,000, he is chairman of the Republican Party in Columbus, Georgia. And really close to Brian Kemp. He challenged 4,000 people. And who was he challenging? He was challenging black soldiers at Fort Benning, which is nearby. So he included, and in fact, you've had him on your on the air before, which is Major Gamaliel Turner, who you'll see in the film. So this is America's special. In fact, he's been assigned
he's
to
way
Dubai
up
right
there.
now.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
he is
shocking.
The Pentagon specialist in warfare of the future.
Right.
It sounds very Star Wars, but it's actually when I was there, he was working on an anti-tank weapon for Ukraine, which was in his living room. I took a picture. He says, "Please don't show that picture that I'm taking home anti-tank rocket launchers in my dining room."
Like, hello.
We're all working remote during COVID, but his job is a little different. But anyways, they challenged this guy's right to vote because the president of the United States, the commander in chief, said, "Go to California, work with our military in California." And so you get this career soldier who's been challenged. And should I tell you, he's black. So that's what they're doing. They're finding black guys, especially soldiers. And so
it's racially motivated. It's absolutely racially motivated.
Well, it has a racial effect because I don't think that these guys care that Major Turner is black. They don't like the color of his vote, which is blue.
Oh,
see?
And
they know that black voters are blue voters. The new thing is that they're going after Asian Americans, they're going after Hispanics, and they're going after young people, especially college students. And what they do is they say, like, for example, and this is in Wisconsin, too. This new thing is going all over the place. In Wisconsin and in Georgia, they're using a system called ERIC, where they say, they say, you've moved. Well, we found in Wisconsin that almost all the people who supposedly moved and lost their vote were students who moved from one dorm room to another.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's ridiculous. So I remember when I was in college, I did not re-register to vote at my college campus. I stayed at home. You don't have to. And I would usually go home to vote. It was, So, but you're right. This is one thing that they're doing. They're unregistering. They're saying they now live in another state, which is not necessarily true. They're there for school. They're not permanently moving to another state.
You get to see all this stuff. You get to meet the major. And what we did was the guy who challenged him dressed up like a vigilante. He dresses up as Doc Holliday. This is a shtick that he does, where he dresses up. He has a 6-shooter, pearl-handled 6-shooter on a holster, the cowboy hat, the boots, the whole Wyatt Earp thing. And he pretends to be Doc Holliday. The only thing is he made a big point that his gun was loaded. And he had challenged the major, said he doesn't really live in Georgia. He lives in California. No. When a soldier's assigned to another military base, you don't lose your citizenship in your own state. But the thing is, so then we invited him to do his little performance of Doc Holliday with his 6-gun loaded. And what he didn't know, I said, "Do you know what house you're in?" No. I said, "You're in the house
of somebody's vote you challenged."
You challenged Major Turner's vote. You said he didn't live in this house. Well, you're in his house. You're
in his house. This is exactly where he lives.
And by the way, do you see that anti-tank rocket? Don't mess. In fact, actually, the truth is that the major. We just had a showing here in Hollywood and with Jamie Foxx.
Nice.
And the major was saying, Greg, you invite a guy with a loaded gun into my house. He's basically already going after white and black people, and he's got a gun. And I'm a warrior.
Funny.
I take loaded guns real seriously. So he was worried because you'll see one thing in the film. You'll see a gun on top of a Bible. That is the major's grandma. They had guns in every.
Wow.
They had Bibles in every room with a gun on every Bible. And he said, "I hope that gun would work if this goes wrong."
This goes sideways.
But I will say that the vigilante, He refused to apologize. That all the
He
major
refused,
actors, He said, just apologize that you didn't know what you were doing. He said, well, I can't apologize. I'm sorry you had a hassle. Hassle? He's in California. He's
got to fly home to vote now because you challenged his vote for no good reason.
He had to fly home to vote. And then he hired lawyers from Washington, D.C. to go to Georgia to federal court. That's a hell of a poll tax, don't you think?
It's a huge one. It's a huge one. And I want to ask you this, Greg, because the two vigilantes that you have, so one of them chased you out of the house with a gun. The other one is refusing to apologize. They were responsible for purging, 36,000 votes off of the voter rolls. And they're just one or two vigilantes out of multiple. So this has happened.
We had 88 vigilantes who challenged a total of 149,000 people this year.
That's
and
insane.
149,000. And by the way, this has gotten zero public coverage, attention. And now we beat a lot of them because of our exposure. In Gwinnett County, they had read, one of the elections officials had read my material and seen the film and voted to not accept 31,000 challenges. But of course, if Brian Kemp wasn't elected, you can bet he would have yanked those board members and said those 31,000 ballots cannot be counted. So we were able to beat back a lot of it, but now we have a runoff, right? December 6th is the runoff between Raphael Warnock, the Democratic senator, the reverend who took Martin Luther King's place at Ebenezer Baptist. I've known him for years. And he's running against Herschel Walker, the Trump's choice. Who's great heroic football player. Yeah. It is a dead heat. There's no rational person who can tell me who's going to win. But it's not really a race between Reverend Warnock, the current senator, and Herschel Walker. It's between Reverend Senator Warnock and Jim Crow, because they've been doing. And one thing we talked about in the film, and I've talked about, if you go to gregpalast.com, you could also see some of my film shorts. That they have closed off, while despite the national press BS that there was a record turnout in early voting in Georgia. This is proof that there's no Jim Crow. Well, they left out early voting includes mail-in voting, and they left that out of the calculation. Well, here's what happened with mail-in voting. It went from 1.2 million to 0.2 million. The simple math is 1 million mail-in ballots were lost. Now, they didn't throw them in the ocean. They just basically didn't allow people. They made it almost impossible to vote by mail. So we had an 81% drop in mail-in voting. A lot of that because they closed away the drop boxes where you put in your mail. And I'm very afraid
over that.
Yeah.
No, let's go over some of the data in SB 202 that you're talking about, because it is really important. So correct me if I'm wrong on this. So one drop box per 100,000 people is the new metric. They have to be inside government buildings, and they're only open during early voting hours. And they also eliminated 102 drop boxes. So they really went after that vote. The point of this was basically to make it easier for people to experience democracy, to participate in our democracy.
And
they've really removed that. Poor people don't always have the ability to get to certain locations and vote within certain timelines, especially if they're working, a job where they can't take leave or something. So this is really going to hinder folks.
It's very big for people who are working two jobs, working late shifts, all that stuff, and they go out and they vote. But what happened is, the reason that they eliminated the drop boxes is they claim it is to stop voter fraud, but literally that Georgia Bureau of Investigation literally went through 78,000 drop box ballots in Fulton County and did not find a single, not one fraudulent ballot where it was not the voter who dropped in the ballot. And remember, they have cameras on these things, so they know who's dropping in the ballot. And by the way, your ballot is not secret because your name's on it.
Yeah, you have to sign it, and the signature has to be verified. There's a whole procedure put in place for this, which seems to get ignored by these folks.
Every absentee ballot has a QR code on it that's unique and a barcode unique. So by the way, that means that they know exactly who voted on what. And here's what they didn't like. We have the actual totals of each candidate from Dropbox ballots and mail-in ballots. 2 years ago, Reverend Warnock beat his Republican opponent by over 2 to 1 in mail-in ballots. And drop box ballots, it was like 3-4 to 1. So basically the mail-in vote, the drop box ballot vote is 2 to 1 or more Democratic. So they said, well, if we can't win over these voters, why don't we just stop them from voting? No drop boxes, no mail. And here's the thing. They took they're brilliant. Brian Kemp is brilliant. He took the runoff. Remember, they lost the runoff at the beginning of 2021. January 5, 2021, you had 2 Democrats win. And but they had 60 days between the general election and the runoff. Now, they cut that to 28. Why 28? Yeah. Why not 29 or 30? Well, first of all, because you need 30, because the registration cutoff is 30 days before an election. So if you have the election in 28 days, you can't register people like that. And second,
so they can't do same day registration. I see what you're saying.
And it's so close. It's so close to the runoff that you have no time to ask for a ballot, get it back. In Georgia, unlike California and other states where it has to be postmarked by Election Day, they say it has to be received by Election Day. So the only way to do that, you don't have time to ask for it. First of all,
that's bad.
You have to ask for the ballot. You have to get it back in time, mail it in, and hope it gets counted in time. The only way to really make sure an absentee ballot gets counted in time is to put it in a drop box. But once again, because it's so crushed, they only will have, instead of the usual 3 weeks of early voting, they will only have 5 to 7 days. That's it. And so they know that 70%, and I want to repeat that, 70% of black people vote early by mail or in-person early voting, usually on Souls to the Polls Day. They also eliminated the Souls to the Polls Day. They said no voting on the weekend prior to the election. There was no time to print the ballots right after the election. And this weekend is Thanksgiving, and the Republicans try to say, well, you can't have voting on Saturday because it's within 2 days of a state holiday.
It's too much. This is too much. Like, how is this even happening, Greg? It's so upsetting to hear this stuff. Like, it's worse than I even knew. Like, you're sharing new information with me right now. This is insane.
Here's one thing I want to tell you. They can't shoplift all the votes all the time. And they
can't?
saw that
it feels like they can.
So, okay, get rid of the fantasy that you can win with 50% plus 1.
Right.
That kind of majority democracy, that ain't in Georgia. But
no.
They overwhelmed the Jim Crow in 2020, 2021. And now you just have to overwhelm it too. And I will say, I'm working very closely. We're having showings all over Georgia of Vigilante. And I'm telling people to go to vigilantemovie.com. But if you also want to support the showings in Georgia, that's why I was speaking to Quitman. We talked about the Quitman 10.
Yeah,
we're going to show the film in Quitman.
Excellent.
We're going to show the film in Quitman. We're going to show the film in these little rural towns where black people are really under the gun. Forget Atlanta. Atlanta's Black Atlanta. Atlanta will be fine. Yeah. But what I'm concerned about are all these rural areas where they have to face nutcases like Doc Holliday who are stopping people from voting. So go to vigilantemovie.com. But we are working with Black Voters Matter, Latasha Brown, the NAACP, Gerald Griggs. We're working with Transformative Justice Coalition. And I got a call from the Reverend Jesse Jackson, said, you better get this film out nationwide.
Nice.
Young man. He always calls me young man. It's like Jesse, we're about the same age. I don't ever say Jesse. He's Reverend.
It's a term of endearment.
Yes. No one who's close to him calls him Jesse. Even his children call him Reverend. So, just a little hint if you're ever going to meet Jesse Jackson, don't call him Jesse. But he's the Reverend. But at any rate, the important thing is he's saying watch the film. But I do want people to understand, I don't want people to watch it just because it's a good for you film. This is not a PBS white guys in front of bookcases film. Even though I'm
it's not. It's very well done. Yeah, I will watch it a second time.
It's supposed to be entertaining.
And it's both. It's informative and entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why Jamie Foxx has paid for this film to be free for the next 2 weeks.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jamie Foxx.
Yeah,
I want to ask you about True the Vote.
Yeah.
So True the Vote is formative in all of this because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they're the dark money behind some of these vigilantes being able to challenge these ballots to begin with.
Yes.
But they go back all the way to the Tea Party. They are not a new organization.
No.
They've been working on trying to suppress votes, for over a decade now. What have you found dark money wise in regards to True the Vote?
So True the Vote is out of Texas. So where did this woman get 32,000 names, this Republican with the assault rifle who's challenging voters? She got them from this Texas group, True the Vote. So did Crazy Doc Holliday and all these GOP guys. They get it from True, because where do they get 32,000 names? They don't know who's voted and not voted, or who lives in Georgia and does. They get it from True the Vote. True the Vote uses these cockamamie schemes, but they know they're basically knocking out legitimate black voters. Now, where do they get their money? So you have to follow the money. So now this Texas Tea Party group, True the Vote, they're getting their money from the Bradley Foundation in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Now, the Bradley Foundation, they're the new Kochs. The Koch brothers basically have kind of pulled back quite a bit from their funding the right-wing crazies. Now, Crazy is being funded by the Bradley Foundation. Wow. The problem is that Crazy is also an attack on democracy, an attack on voters of color. And they're the ones, by the way, True the Vote, who made that film 2,000 Mules. And so
which we're going to talk about in a second.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, do you have anything else on True the Vote before we switch to that? Because I do want to get into it.
That is 2,000 Mules is their film.
Okay, that is their film. All right, so 2,000 Mules, they have this clip that was viral on Twitter. It was viral on a lot of the social media. And it's basically used in the film multiple times over and over again. It's a guy putting ballots into a box. One of them falls out. He picks it up. They put it back in, right? So they think this is some giant, scary smoking gun, when in reality, it is perfectly normal for somebody to take their neighbors or their family's ballots and drop them off at the same time. And there's nothing fraudulent. And there's nothing fraudulent about it. Here's the thing, folks. With the mail-in ballot, there has to be a signature on the top, and those signatures are actually verified. If they don't match, the ballot is put aside, and you're given a certain amount of time where you can rectify that. Come in and show them that's your signature, prove that it's you. So the idea that there's fraud attached to this is absolutely patently absurd. It's just not the case. But they use this clip over and over again.
And part of it, as Latasha Brown says in our film, they're showing black men. It's all black men. And they, and by the way, they say it is.
You're right. It absolutely is.
It's all black men who are stuffing ballots, with rare exceptions, stuffing ballots into these drop boxes. Now, understand. So that guy that they showed, this one guy putting in one or two ballots. It turns out, by the way, they identified him.
They did. Okay.
He's a major executive at a big tech firm in Atlanta, and he's dropping off his ballot and his daughter's ballot or something. Who lives with him, and
wow.
And he is suing their pants off.
Good,
because
he should.
And you know what he's guilty of? He's guilty of voting while black. Because what makes this guy? If you had a white person walk up to the drop box, stick in their ballot,
they wouldn't have cared.
Or they're putting a couple ballots, and they say, "Okay, that's their family," whatever. You get grandma's ballot, who lives with you. You take it in.
Right.
No, but it was a black man. Young black male. Youngish black male. He's probably in his 30s. He had a fancy car. They said, there he is, a criminal. This is, you know what they literally said? This is O.J. Simpson running from the scene of a crime. O.J. Simpson. Okay.
Because some of the clips in there were ridiculous. They had One American Network, some of the really bizarre far right, streamers look at this guy, and you're just watching this and you're like, what is this conspiracy ridden lunacy? How is this real?
Here's the thing. The wall, even Fox News says 2,000 Mules is crazy. Everyone says 2,000, even the Wall Street Journal, all these places say 2,000 Mules is crazy. Well, then how come they changed the Georgia law at the request of True the Vote? How come if there was not one illegitimate drop box ballot, how come they removed the drop box? And keep in mind, because they
want to maintain power by voter suppression. It's really obvious that's the goal.
And the other thing is that's why we also in Vigilante again, the full title is Vigilante, Georgia's Vote Suppression Hitman. But I want to tell you, don't think of it as a Georgia film, because these tricks are coming to a state near you. In fact, at the beginning of the film, you have Martin Sheen explaining that. He says, look, the movie's coming to a state near you, and so is this vote suppression trickery. So SB 202 is the national pattern, because my investigations over the years, whether it's for Rolling Stone or BBC, Guardian, Al Jazeera, what I found is that they test drive their Jim Crow tricks in Georgia, and then they take them nationwide, because they have this guy, Brian Kemp, who's willing to do anything to stop black people and young people from voting. And it makes me ill that he's being played as some type of hero, when in all the years of my work on vote suppression, he is the most vicious, worst vote suppressor in the United States in the 20 years I've been investigating vote suppression.
Now, 100% he is. So the Bradley Foundation, this is out of Ohio, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pulling that. Wisconsin. Okay. So they're out of Wisconsin. I know with Voter Crosscheck, it was like 28 states that were involved using that software. It started in Kansas, but it's spread out.
Yes.
And obviously with True the Vote being based in Texas, they've got dark money coming in from Wisconsin. They're working obviously in Georgia. But my understanding is those vigilante voter rolls, whatever you want to call them, have also been used in other states, not just in Georgia.
Yeah, so far it's already spread.
Okay.
We've gone to, and there might be more in counting. I'm just looking at the Bloomberg report. I have my own reports, but I'll go with Bloomberg, which puts it at 10, where you're seeing these vigilante challenges. They don't have the same law as Georgia, but most states have some type of law that says, oh, if you know someone's an illegal voter, let us know. It's just like, you see someone committing a crime, you drop a dime. But they're not saying, oh, Joe Black is an illegal voter. They're providing computerized lists, spreadsheets with thousands and thousands of names of people they say don't live where they live. It's not true. A student has gone home for the summer. Someone's in the hospital, or like in the case of Major Turner, he's in the military. He gets assigned to another base.
Right.
So what's happened is, yes, it's gone to Arizona, Florida, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Iowa, Ohio. I can't think of right offhand where else it's erupting, but it's erupting all over. It's very dangerous stuff. Don't forget that this vigilante challenge business was originally created by the Ku Klux Klan in Georgia. Again, it started in Georgia. In 1946, Eugene Talmadge ran for governor of Georgia against an incumbent. And the way he won was he activated the Ku Klux Klan to challenge every single black voter. In some counties, there were no black voters left. So they did this mass challenge of black voters using this vigilante law, which Brian Kemp is now using. So Brian Kemp won.
So this law isn't new. So this has been on the books there for decades then.
SB 202, SB 202 is new. That was only signed by Brian Kemp.
But the vigilante part,
So what happened was, here's what they did. They took the white sheets from the Ku Klux Klan and they turned them into spreadsheets. So the Ku Klux Klan guys were each filling out a single sheet of paper. Don't allow Joe Black to vote. Don't allow Joe Johnson to vote. Don't allow Mary Johnson to vote. Now they hand in, under SB 202, they can hand in spreadsheets with lists of names. This woman wouldn't even print, because there's too many names for her to print out. She said it was too expensive. It would have cost her, $500 at Kinko's. So she handed in a thumb drive with the names. She handed in a thumb drive and stopped 32,000 people.
And she wasn't even ashamed or embarrassed by it.
I mean, she thought that she was very heroic, but she didn't do anything. But she knew what she was doing.
She knew what she was doing. I mean, it really pisses me off, Greg, because this is the same group of people that think they're patriots, right? They're suppressing the votes of other Americans, which is an affront to democracy. But at the same time, they think they're being a patriot. And they know full well that these voters are legal to vote. They don't care.
Well, I think that they don't care. But see, here's the thing. When they're confronted with people like Major Turner, say, you would challenge this man's vote.
Yeah.
And I show Pam Reardon, this woman, by the way, her name was Tamara Horn, who only lived a couple miles away, a black woman. And I said, you've challenged your neighbor, Tamara Horn. Do you know her? No, I don't know her. It's like, but you challenge your right to vote. You challenge me. So when they meet them, they feel a bit ashamed. Now, I have to say, you'll see on the film that Doc Holliday, he didn't shoot. He did pull out a 6-gun, but not to shoot, just to show it to us. It was kind of, but he's this old guy with this gun. And I was thinking, this doesn't look good. And, but he just said, well, I don't know. He said, I don't know the procedure. Well, what, you're stopping people from voting and you don't.
And you don't even know? You even bother to find out? Yeah.
And so they didn't. So they knew. All they knew is that this right-wing group was handing them lists of names. They were stopping voters from voting, and they'll even say, "Well, the state screwed up. They should have checked. They should have known we didn't have any idea who these people are." Well, excuse me.
That's not how it works.
The law specifically, by the way, the law does say you actually have to have knowledge.
Reason.
That
just
someone
reason.
And that someone put in a temporary change of address card because they went home for summer break.
Isn't
is not. So this is the games that are being played. It's ugly. It's Jim Crow, and the national press. And
are there repercussions? Are there repercussions for them if they do file these challenges and it turns out they didn't do their due diligence in?
There should be. Now,
there should be, but is there?
Here's the thing: is that right now there is, and I hope that this expands, one lawsuit.
Good.
Major Gamaliel Turner's lawyers are suing for taking away his civil rights and maybe defamation. But it's very difficult to do. Only one state, actually, believe it or not, only Florida is the only state I know of that says if you make a false claim, against another voter. Well, remember,
Florida?
it was a Democratic. Florida was Democratic-controlled state for a very long time.
That's true.
And so on their books is still the law says if you make a false accusation against another voter, that you could pay a heavy fine. Whereas there's no other state. In other words, it's a free shot. Oh, I was wrong. They're just a bunch of black people, soldiers assigned to Texas. We found another soldier who was challenged by the GOP that is at Fort Hood. And you know what the evidence, by the way, in that case, you know what evidence they used? They didn't use a change of address form. Instead, they found that he had a girlfriend while he was stationed at Fort Hood in Texas, this Georgian. He got a local girlfriend, and they made a big point, a Hispanic girlfriend, and she posted pictures of them going out.
You're kidding me.
In Texas while he was at the military base. And
that was their proof.
They said that's proof. He's got a Hispanic girlfriend in Texas. He's not a Georgia citizen. He can't vote. I can't make, by the way, I can't make this up. This is true. This is absolutely.
No, I mean, I believe it's true. I mean, all the wild things out there, Let me ask you this, Greg. What role do you think, conspiracy groups, right-wing conspiracy groups such as QAnon play? What is their role in all of this? Is it just simply to rile up the base and spread, conspiracy theories like 2,000 Mules, or is there more involvement there?
Well, I mean, actually, I would ask you and hope that you'll have a chance to invite on the specialist on the Palast. This is Greg Palast. I have a whole team. I'm the guy in the hat of the camera, but we have a whole team of investigators and operators.
Okay.
And we have one guy, Zach D. Roberts, a famed.
Oh, yes, Zach. Yes. I would love to have Zach on. Zach's great.
And he is a specialist at infiltrating. If you look at Zach on camera, you see he looks like a skinhead white nationalist.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. So he looks the part. So he goes undercover.
The part. And they haven't been, they don't know him yet. Yeah. The minute they figure out who he is, he's burnt.
When they find him, he's been in trouble, but he's been beaten pretty well, including by the cops. But Zach can tell you that these ultra-right groups, and it's not just, QAnon, there's the Boogaloo Boys, there's all these groups.
It's all these groups, the militias, they're standing guard at polls.
They're armed, they're dangerous.
Yeah.
And the problem is that they are just the enforcement intimidation arm of the center of the Republican Party. And I'm not being partisan about this. Brian Kemp is considered a moderate. The Wall Street Journal yesterday editorialized that Brian Kemp should be the Republican Party nominee in 2024. That wouldn't surprise me because he's played by the national press as this great moderate. He's the anti-Trump. He's not the anti-Trump.
He is absolutely not the anti-Trump. Yeah,
but he says, I like Trump. Trump doesn't like me. On terms of policies, they're exactly the same. And in terms of vicious Jim Crow attacks on the voter rolls. So on one hand, Brian Kemp said, we had no problems with our elections. Our election in Georgia was perfect. But now he has 98 pages of Jim Crow changes to the law. Yeah. And he just said the elections had no problem, yet now he's stopping.
But now I'm going to
hundreds
suppress
of
the
thousands
vote.
of voters. Yeah. So
it's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's talk about that enforcement intimidation aspect of this, because that can be just as detrimental as these things that we've previously discussed today. You know, so somebody comes to vote and they see a couple of right-wing militia guys and they have, you know, they're armed with major weapons, they're wearing bulletproof vests, you know, whatever else they've got on, and they're standing right in front of the ballot box. Obviously, the point here is to intimidate certain voters.
Yes.
You know, obviously this was happening in Arizona. Carrie Lake was running for governor.
I mean, this is why we're very concerned about guys like Doc Holliday with his 6-gun. And you have in Georgia, what we have at the beginning of the Vigilante film is guys who are Confederate reenactors. So they dress up as rebels with their guns and they play and they do this cosplay thing. Yeah. And some of them, I'm going to say legitimately.
That's the Sons of Confederate. What's the group again? Sons of Confederate Soldiers, or
the Sons of the Confederacy and the Daughters of the Confederacy.
Sons of the Confederacy. Okay, yeah. There's a lot of right-wing militias involved, and also a lot of those guys were up at Charlottesville. I don't know if you know that. So they've definitely been involved.
Well, Zach was up at Charlottesville, so he can tell you all about it because he was obviously is with us in Georgia. But he took the famous picture of the Tiki Torch Parade, which was on the cover of the New York Times Magazine. That's Zach's photo. So he's always in the middle of it. And you see thousands of guys with Tiki torches coming right at him. And I'm thinking, Zach, get the hell out of there. But he got a great photo.
That was a great shot, yeah.
And
totally worth it. I would have done the same thing, let's be honest.
It's not.
Zach and I have similar stomachs.
Well, he goes for the danger. I try to go. I go after crazies, but I try to avoid the armed ones. I really do. But the so the problem is you have this intimidation, but you have to put it together with the official harassment. So, for example, you've got guys who are looking threatening. These white nationalists who are looking threatening. Okay, they're allowed to be there. Georgia's an open carry state, so they can have their guns on the outside. They can actually walk around with a rifle. Now, but what they can't. But then, okay, so someone says, "All right, these guys are goofballs." But then you go and you found out you've been challenged, and you say, "No, I want my right. I want my ballot." And so here, fill out this provisional ballot, which they mostly toss away. You say, "No, I want a real ballot." And you get in a fight with the board person who's there, and suddenly these guys with the guns, you know. So, and plus, don't forget is that the police in these rural Georgia areas are often incredibly hostile to the black voters and black officials. In fact, you'll see, like by the way, one thing that we did get for the film Vigilante, you'll see we have a lot of police body camera imagery. You'll see from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, we show the arrest of Olivia Pearson, who's the first black woman elected to the city council in let's see, she's elected to the city council. I'm trying to remember the town now, but we're going to have a showing. She's having a showing there next week of the film Vigilante. But
I know, and I remember seeing this too. I remember the scene. I can't remember.
Right, the body camera footage. Of Olivia Pearson being arrested, and she's facing 5 years in prison. This is Brian Kemp, because Brian Kemp, as a Secretary of State, had a power to arrest people, or call for the Attorney General to arrest people, or use the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Which, by the way, the Georgia Bureau has now said we're no longer a Klan army. We are no longer the governor's private Gestapo. We are going to stop this. So the GBI said after the 2020 election. And they went through 78,000 ballots. They said, that's it. We're done with this game. We're not doing it anymore. But
is that because they realized that they were arresting people that were innocent? Did they have some sort of come to Jesus moment?
We're not doing this anymore. Exactly. The new head of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation says, okay, that's it. Game over. We're not being used as like a new Klan front. Forget it. And I appreciate that. There is progress.
That's a good move. But that is progress.
Olivia Cooley was arrested. And you see the body camera footage. Again, she was supposedly ballot tampering because she was she was county official. She was sitting. She was working the polls. And if someone has a disability and can't handle the polls, they just fill out a piece of paper that says, "I need help
Right.
knowing how this machine works. So they arrested her saying that she was telling people how to vote when all it was handicapped people saying, please show me how to use the machine. So, of course, a jury took minutes. This woman was facing 5 years in prison. The jury took like 40 seconds to say,
no.
You're kidding. She's innocent. It's a white jury, by the way. I just want to remind you that.
Well, I mean, even that's a bridge too far for some folks. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
so
like,
what
come
happens
on.
is that, so what happens is that this is the type of intimidation that they face. They're afraid to call the police because they don't know which side the police are on.
They're right.
Afraid. So, so you've got a big problem and that was...
well, it's just great. It's one more way that they stop people from voting, right? So if people see her getting arrested, she did nothing wrong, clearly. In the meantime, how many people decided, you know what, I don't need to get arrested like this. I'm not even going to bother to vote. I mean, it does have a chilling effect on the democratic process.
In fact, she even said, look, when she helped this young woman vote, and Olivia got arrested for helping her vote, and she filed the affidavit saying, I asked her to help me. She's a voting, but I don't know how to use I had a problem. I couldn't use the machine. Please show me how to do it. And so Olivia said, you got to go back and vote. And she said, after what they did to you, I don't want to vote. And she said, that's the whole point. They're trying to stop you from voting. And so this is what George Ryan said. I hear this over and over from like Black Voters Matter and Latasha Brown, Barbara Arnwine, the lawyers. They say, you have to understand the Black community. These people are dangerous and they're afraid to go out. Reasonably afraid because they get
it's
arrested.
Understandable.
When you arrest
or killed,
when you arrest government officials doing their job, and then they talk about and then like Raffensperger says, I was being threatened. He's the Republican Secretary of State. I was being threatened, and people are supposed to be sympathetic. Well, he's run a whole intimidation operation. I mean, by the way, he wasn't threatened by the Democrats or the Black people. He was threatened by people even more right-wing than him. In other words, the ultra-right, the Trumpite ultra-right, was not happy with Kemp and Raffensperger because they say they didn't stop the, Trump losing.
He wanted his 11th. Yeah, he wanted his 11,000. But that doesn't mean that Brian Kemp's the good guy. He's been terrible all along. He just couldn't. He couldn't find a way for this.
He said, I don't know
exactly.
I can't do this. In fact, what I want to know is because the grand jury testimony that he just gave is sealed. He won't say what he said. But I used to do racketeering investigations for the Justice Department. And
I didn't know that.
Others. And for many attorneys general. I was actually, see the hat? I earned that as an actual investigator before I was an investigative reporter. So I was for 25 years.
So you've got a mad skill set.
Yeah, so I'm an actual, I'm a certified, literally, investigator. So So the thing is that I do know that what almost certainly happened, and I usually don't speculate like this, but I've done this in front of juries. Say, look, what happened here? You have the President of the United States call a Secretary of State. He's not going to call the Secretary of State till after he calls the governor. He did. And I suspect that Kemp said, I can't do anything, but call that guy down the hall from me. He can do something. and then the guy down the hall said, I don't know. Remember, there were 29 phone calls. We only have a recording from one when he knew he had to protect himself. These guys are afraid of breaking rocks on a chain gang because you have a prosecutor down the street named Fani Willis, who is not under the control of the Justice Department. So she doesn't have Biden saying, ooh, this is too politically dangerous. Don't touch this. She is investigating Trump and Kemp and the rest of the vote gangsters. And she is the Fulton County prosecutor while she's using federal and Georgia law, a racketeering law that she's investigating. They're going to have a tough time. So they knew that Fani Willis was watching them like a hawk about overturning the election. And so, yes, they disqualified. You have to understand, they did disqualify thousands of ballots, but not enough to save Trump and not enough to save us, to save the Republicans running for Senate. Because they knew that at a certain point you go from doing creepy, horrible things that are maybe a little iffy under the law,
little iffy, unethical, into doing a felony.
And that's they don't want to be breaking rocks on a chain gang. Kemp wants to be president.
Right. He'll push it to the limit, right? But he's like, yeah, I can't do a felony here. But, you know, I fully believe, Greg, that if there had been some sort of way for him to finagle 11,000 votes, he absolutely would have. I think
SB 22 is the way. In other words, under new SB 22, he now has that power.
The power.
And people have to understand that if you have a literal repeat, if Trump gets a nomination, it comes down to Georgia, it's close. This time, if he calls Kemp will say, yeah, I have the power. I'm going to decertify the results from Fulton County, Atlanta. You're president. Right. That's what I'm worried
about. No, and that's a valid reason to be worried. Greg, what other parts of Vigilante have I not brought up that you think are important?
Well, there's a ton, but I think the biggest one is history. Because the film switches and gives you the history of Georgia that you didn't know. The first thing, which Brian Kemp really doesn't want you to know, it was his family.
Right.
Because no one knows, where's the name Kemp come from? Who knows? It turns out he is the scion of the heir of the big plantation owners, the Habershams and the Roswells, who first brought enslaved Africans to Georgia. You know what people don't know is that Georgia, as we explained in the film, was one of the few places in the United States, Georgia, where slavery was against the law in Georgia, because these were Swiss German freeholders and they didn't want slavery and plantations competing against these small farmers. So it was against the law. But then the King of England, George III, cut a deal with the Habershams to allow them to bring in Kemp's ancestors to bring in enslaved people from Africa.
Wow.
And by the way, the reason was they were the high-tech workers at the time, believe it or not. They were, because they knew how to plant rice. And Englishmen didn't know how to plant rice. So they brought in Africans who could plant rice. And then later it became cotton. And that's the basis of Brian Kemp's wealth and power, is slavery. And I think, and here's why this is important. You know, Brian Kemp didn't bring Africans in chains. That was his ancestor. I'm not going to blame him. But like his cousin says, this is the source of our wealth. This is the source of our authority and our privilege. Let's admit it. Let's try to repair things with the people that we own.
Support reparations. You know, there are a million things
help
you could
out.
do.
You know, a lot of things that his cousin is doing, for example, to work with the people, the ancestors of the progeny of the people that her family enslaved. But Kemp won't admit to this history. And not only that, but he is the spearhead of this movement against what they call critical race theory. So he actually signed a law after SB 202. He signed another law, which goes with it, called SB 1085, and that law says you cannot. It's against the law for any teacher in a Georgia school to teach, quote, divisive historical concept. Well, just
they mean CRT, but
divisive. So what it really comes down to is if you say the governor made his money from enslaving people, that's how his family made his money.
That's divisive. We can't make our little white children feel bad about our past.
Well, you can't make the governor feel bad. I don't think the white kids, because don't forget, most of the white kids are the victims of his family. Remember that the smallholders,
100%. They were also harmed. Yeah,
is that white people ended up becoming, whereas enslaved people became sharecroppers, most white people became sharecroppers in the South. White poverty in the South was absolutely devastating, and that's because of the plantation system, which continued until basically some of it even today. Brian Kemp still owns these big properties called Plantation LLC, but instead of picking cotton, he's turned it into giant toilet paper ranches. These plantations where they grow pine trees to turn them into toilet paper for Koch Industries, by the way, is their cousin. So you see the lockup with money. You can't get away from history, and that's also in Vigilante. History.
All these right-wing extremists sort of go in a circle, don't they?
Oh, and I think the most important thing to mention, it's narrated by Rosario Dawson. You can't get better than that.
It is, and she does an awesome job. Yes, we should mention that. Rosario Dawson does it. Yeah, the whole entire thing was great. I really enjoyed your documentary. It's completely buttoned down. You left no end untied. it was really well done. So congratulations on that. So if folks want to keep in touch with your work, where is the best place to do that? I don't know if Twitter's going to be around tomorrow, but...
Well, how about we do something safe and go to gregpalast.com.
There you go.
GregPalast.com. I'm about to head off to Georgia now, and I will be reporting from there. You'll get my newest reports from there. You'll find out my films, books, etc. And if you want to see, and you can find the link there at gregpalast.com.
Okay.
It'll get you to vigilantemovie.com, where you can see the film Vigilante gratis for the next 2 weeks while the Georgia runoff's on.
That's great. I'm going to watch it a second time since that's the case. There's probably, sometimes with these sometimes with these documentaries, you pick up stuff the second time around that you kind of like only tangentially paid attention to the first time.
As long as it's
you have a better understanding.
And it is
It's very entertaining. And
I
knowledge.
want it where people could, they'll laugh, you'll cry, and you can eat popcorn in between. And that's why I wanted to
and get pissed. Like, it made me mad, I have to be honest with you. I was really angry after watching.
Yeah.
And I actually know some of this information, so it wasn't all brand new to me, and it still made me really angry.
You know
I was
why?
like,
Because unlike most U.S. news reporters, I will not do a report unless I introduce you to the victims of the story, and I will not do a report unless I introduce you to the perpetrators of these crimes. So I take a long time to do these films. That's why I have my own independent foundation to fund it. So go to vigilantemovie.com or to gregpalast.com, either place. You can get the film for free and pass the link around while it's free for 2 weeks.
excellent. All right, Greg, thank you so much for joining us this week on Right Wing Insanity Report. We appreciate your time.
Okay, stay sane and stay safe.